Often practices have a partnership deed in place, which they may have cobbled together themselves, or they've had it professionally constructed, but it can go out of date very quickly. It can go out of date because of a change in the legislation. It can go out of date not because of the retirement of a partner, but because of the admission of a new partner. And typically practices will say, oh, well, they're on an assessment period, we'll update it at the end of the assessment period because we don't know whether he or she is going to survive the assessment period. But actually the reality is that the law doesn't recognise the assessment period, and the moment you admit a new partner to the practice, whether they are on an assessment period or not, if you do not update your partnership deed, it becomes invalid upon the admission of that partner. So it's really critical to get your partnership deed updated to include that new partner from day one and not from the date that they've served out an assessment period. Without a partnership deed, the new profit shares are not set out clearly. There is no retirement provisions in place. There's no way of exiting the problem other than dissolution, which in the NHS is an absolute last resort, because dissolution involves a termination of the business. If you own your surgery premises and you've documented the ownership of the surgery premises in the partnership deed, then the property owning partners are at severe risk by not having a partnership deed in place, because their joint ownership and the governance of the surgery building isn't set out anywhere in writing. So whilst they may think it's set out in the partnership deed, if the partnership deed has lapsed, then, for instance, the valuation methodology set out in the deed has also lapsed. So there's no clear mechanism for valuing the building, there's no clear mechanism for taking decisions in relation to the building. What happens when somebody then leaves the partnership? If you had contractual obligations to sell the building when someone retires, those contractual obligations have also fallen away. So the risks in relation to the partnership are also undocumented. So you can join a partnership, and if there isn't a partnership deed in place, covering off historic liabilities and ring-fencing them to the previous former partners, you can end up picking up liability for historic liabilities which you weren't aware of, no matter how much due diligence you've conducted. Without a partnership deed in place, the division between the property owner's liabilities in relation to the surgery premises and the non-property owning partner's liabilities in relation to the ownership of the surgery premises isn't clearly set out. So we would always recommend that a practice has an up-to-date partnership agreement in place to protect the NHS surgery contract to the extent that it's appropriate ownership of the surgery premises. We offer a partnership review service where we will review the NHS partnership deed free of charge and report back to you on whether we think it is fit for purpose or whether you need to start off with a new partnership agreement. We come across quite a lot of partnerships that have been very stable over the years. So they've had a partnership agreement in place since the early 90s. But given the change in the NHS political organisational structure, even those partnership agreements, whilst they might still be valid and binding, they were drafted in a very different legal environment. They do need to be reviewed and updated.